Hi, what up? I recently came across a video from Adam Elmore that I found really interesting. And in this video, he laid out 4 points as to why he's leaving React behind. And I'm super happy he shared his take. Let's look at the 4 points he makes as to why he's not choosing React for his future projects. I'll present you with my take, and I also think this makes for an amazing, nuanced discussion. So I encourage you to share your opinion in the comments. There is no right, there is no wrong, and the main purpose of this video is not to convince him otherwise. It's not to defend React, it's not to defend any other framework. This is not a competition. All the frameworks in this video are not competing with each other. We're all web devs, we're all trying to use whatever is the most practical for our use case. For me, that happens to be React, and most of the time next.js. For other people, that's entirely different frameworks, and that's why I think it's so crucial to keep an open mind in this whole debate. Reason number 1 as to why he's leaving React behind is the vibe is off. He feels like he's writing wrong code, or it is deemed as wrong by React developers if it doesn't align with the interests of the React authors. Secondly, he questions if React is the best way to write understandable, intuitive code that makes you productive. Thirdly, other frameworks such as solid.js are more precise in how you write them and offer you performance benefits if compared to React. And then lastly, as the 4th point, the future of React is unclear. Where are we going? Server components, client components, single page apps, multi-page apps. Where is React headed? I think what makes the most sense is to go through each point separately, beginning with the first one, that React feels kind of pretentious as to you're writing wrong code if it doesn't align with how React is meant to be written. I think what is super crucial in this argument is to very clearly differentiate between where React is and where next.js is, and draw a very clear line between those two. The take here is that more so in the next direction, as I took away from the video, the people from next.js or Vercel are sitting on their ivory tower and pointing at people and saying, hey, this is good code and this is bad code, you shouldn't do this. And you know what? I totally understand where this point comes from. Take, for example, this tweet just posted very recently by Lee Robinson. I'm not 100% sure if I fully understand it, but especially with the tagline of why is this not illegal, it does leave a bit of a weird aftertaste. But then, on the other hand, the Next.js team is also very engaged in clearly presenting their ideas for the web. The documentation has just been updated very recently on the basis of community feedback. So people are being heard and their ideas are being incorporated into how Vercel shapes the future of the web. And while, yes, the presentation style of the Vercel ship event did seem kind of elitist or very, opinionated in how they present their ideas, especially with the design and so on. They went for a very specific thing, all dressed in black. I also understand why they did it, because they worked so hard on the features, they want eyes on the thing, right? So I totally understand where this point is coming from. I think it's also important to consider how involved they are in clearly explaining their take on the web and presenting it as solely an alternative to what is currently existing. Take, for example, what Dan Abramov said. I'm not sure if I can find the original source, but I read it somewhere on Twitter. There is no should in learning. If you're learning a framework, there is no should. Yes, there are established best practices, there are established conventions. In learning, it is totally fine to break free from those and do whatever you want to really get the hang of a framework you're learning. Development is inherently subjective. Each person has different approaches of writing code that resonates in different levels. React might click for some really well, like for me personally. It might not for other people, and then moving away towards other frameworks is a very understandable solution to this. Second argument for leaving React behind is good code is understandable, intuitive, and you are productive in writing the code. And I must say, I mostly disagree with what was said during the video. I don't think how other frameworks go about things such as state or breaking free of the framework, for example, inside of a use effect, is much different logically as it is in React. Mostly it's just the syntax. Take, for example, a video I did 1 or 2 weeks ago about Quick. Quick is very similar to Solid in how they alleviate problems such as state management or breaking out of the framework to handle stuff like, data fetching inside of a use effect, for example. In React, like that would be the equivalent. And they're all trying to solve a similar problem of state management or breaking free, but in a different syntactic way. Yes, it is cleaner syntactically in Solid or Quick than it might be in React. UseEffect has been criticized heavily. It's not very intuitive in the first place. But my point here is that logically, these do the same thing. If you're using a signal versus using a state, they do the same thing. They force a re-render of a certain property so it is refreshed to the user. How they go about that syntactically and under the hood is different. In Quick, it's more optimized because it doesn't re-render the entire component. But logically, it is the same thing. So I think once you grasp the concept of what a UseEffect does for you, it becomes very intuitive to understand how Quick or Solid solve the same things just in a different syntax. And then you'll be just as productive in React as in any other framework because you understand why you are doing what you're doing. Why are we using a UseEffect here to fetch data? Why can't we do this at the top level? At least not in server components, I'm gonna get to that later. Why can't we fetch at the top level in client components? That's logically when a UseEffect comes in, and it's no different in the other frameworks. Okay, third point, other frameworks are more performant and simpler to write. He's right, they are. Especially in Quick, I was actually pretty surprised in how well you can get across the same logic as a React component would in less code in a syntactically cleaner way. And other frameworks tend to actually be more performant. Quick just re-renders what changed in the state. Not the whole component is re-rendered, but just the single value, for example, that you're using in your JSX to display something to the user. If it changes, only that part is getting re-rendered and not the whole component, which allows for O1 scalability. In React, that is different because the whole component is being re-rendered. I'm not 100% sure how Solid.js does this. Anyways, the point is, yes, other frameworks do tend to handle performance a bit more effectively than React currently does, especially because they're still holding onto their VDOM model. And then the last point, very interesting one, server components are confusing. They really are. Again, we have to differentiate React versus next.js. Where does React end in the case of server components and where does next.js begin? Because in next.js, server components have been established in the new next.js 13 version. And correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think you can use them in plain React just yet. That is a very good point. They are confusing. That is why the creators are trying so hard to explain them as well as possible. On Twitter, Dan Abramov's pinned tweet, for example, is a clear explanation of what server components actually do for you. Theo on his channel has talked a lot about server components in the past and the change in paradigm in how we write code that affects us as React developers. What does co-location mean? Writing back-end code in front-end files? Is that the same thing as in Solid.js where you can write functions for your backend that you can call from a front-end file where the compiler does the work of splitting the front-end and the backend, whereas in Next.js or React server components, that is not actually co-location. You are writing server code inside your server components. You're not co-locating that with client logic. Only the HTML is then being shipped to the client and then rendered on the client. And I believe in Solid.js, this principle has existed for far longer than it has in Next.js server components. But the point being, I totally understand how this is confusing to many people. I don't fully understand it either. And as I understood from Adam, this uncertainty in the future of React is a big reason as to why he doesn't trust the React leadership to define the future of the web. Again, important distinction to make. Server components in React versus how they're implemented in Next.js. In Remix, as far as I know, they're not implemented at all. They might be in the future, judging by Dan Abramov's recent appearance at the Remix Conf, but that is uncertain. Nevertheless, I see a very bright future for React. There's so much innovation going on, the ecosystem. A very important point. Ecosystem, package support in your framework of choice, super important, is huge in React because it is the most popular framework. A very big point that you cannot neglect when you're switching over to new frameworks. And also, on most websites I visit, I check how they architect their website. I see React a lot of the time on super professional websites. I believe that, for example, ChatGPT, the fastest app to ever reach 100 million users, uses React, Next.js and Next.auth as their main technologies. I'm not sure if the backend is actually handled in Next.js. I can't verify that, but at least for their front end and for most of what they do, they're using Next.js. I believe that is a very strong sign this technology is here to stay, and more people are adopting it, for example, as the NPM downloads show. This video is not meant to change anyone's opinions. After all, I encourage you, go out, try all the frameworks you want and find what works for you. For me personally, React clicked. Next.js clicked and I really enjoy working with them. I feel like I'm writing intuitive, good, productive code, whatever the argument was. For other people, that might be totally different. I encourage an open-minded debate in the comments. Let me know what you think, what your takes are on these 4 arguments. And then lastly, thank you for Adam for sharing your opinion and encouraging this whole debate in the first place. That's gonna be it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video and then I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one and bye bye.